You're watching Gearz, brought to you by Ram Truck.
You know, when it comes to modifying an SUV, there are usually two schools of thought. The first is the big, rugged off-road look with bigger tires and bumpers. The second is the lowered, smooth street look with a lot of billet and chrome. And when you're talking about a Cadillac like this, well, most people think that you're going to do the street look because that's what everybody does. But what if we took a Cadillac in the other direction? Yeah, that could be pretty cool. So we borrowed this Cadillac Escalade from country music artist Jason Sturgeon. See if we can slap a little off-road mojo on it.
I'm country through and through, but I've got this stuff in me that, you know, those rock things that just, I don't know, it finds its way out.
I grew up on country. Country wasn't cool. There was a gun in the rack of my truck in the parking lot of school.
Since Jason is a hardcore off-roader, we figured it would be great to connect that with his love for country music and the music industry's obsession with Cadillacs.
There's such a history with Cadillac in country music, and Johnny Cash is one piece at a time, stealing all the parts to make the Psychobilly Cadillac. I want a Psychobilly Cadillac.
You can take out pop country music and put it in the ground.
Now, obviously, we can't go too big here because this is a daily driver and something that's going to be used primarily on the street. So we need something in the ballpark of about a 3-inch lift. So we went to the guys at Skyjacker, got a 3.5-inch suspension lift for the GM trucks and SUVs. Check it out. Now, as you can see, this is a fairly simple system. Not a lot of parts on this table. For the front lift, you have a couple of big cross members, then these huge steering knuckles, then some spacers and brackets and hardware. Then for the rear, you have new lower links, a couple of new coil springs, and then once again some brackets and hardware. This is a system that the average gearhead should be able to install in his garage over the weekend, even if you don't have a floor lift. With the truck in the air and the wheels off, the first step is to get the front brake calipers out of the way. Then disconnect the sway bar end links and remove the sway bar. Follow that by removing the steering knuckles, the struts, the A-arms, and the axle shafts. Finally, remove the rear cross member, pull out the front differential. And that's really all there is to the front disassembly. Now, I know what looks like an Escalade front end just exploded all over the place. But the good news is almost every one of these pieces is going to be reused. Basically, what this kit does is lower everything down to give us the lift that we need. So the first thing we're going to put on are these aluminum spacers that are going to drop the differential down, then we'll get the differential back in place. The new cross members go in next using the supplied hardware. Then the stock A-arms bolt to the cross members. Okay, the next thing to go on are the struts. Now, before you bolt these guys on, you're going to have to mount a 3.5-inch spacer on top. This is where your lift comes from. Fortunately, they just bolt on using some supplied hardware. Now, before you put the struts on, there is something else that needs some attention, your axles. With a 3.5-inch lift, those are going to be too short. So the kit comes with a 1-inch spacer. It's going to mount here, and that's going to lengthen the axle. Then, just reassemble everything.
Now, quick tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
When you're working on suspension, there are a couple of things that you're going to have to deal with: separating ball joints and tie rod ends. Now, there are some special tools out there to help you do this. These are called tie rod separators or pickle forks, and they slide on, basically hit them with a hammer or an air hammer, and they separate the joint. Problem is, not everybody's got these, and they can damage the rubber boot on the joint. So the question is there another way to do this? The answer is yes. Just unscrew the nut, but don't take it all the way off. Then take your sledgehammer and hit right here on the side of the spindle. After a few whacks, the joint should separate. If that doesn't work for you, a lot of the joints have an unthreaded tip on them, and you can lightly strike that with a hammer to drive the joint up and separate it. Now, if neither one of these techniques is working for you, you're going to have to invest in some pickle forks. If you'd like to learn some more tips to make your life easier in the shop, check out the tips page on the website.
When the country music singers started living in Beverly Hills, buying mansions in France and all that stuff when I could barely pay my bills. Oh.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are walking you through the steps of putting a Skyjacker 3.5-inch lift on a Cadillac Escalade. Now, some of you might be wondering, why in the world would you want to lift a Cadillac? Well, first of all, it's cool. Second of all, under the skin, the Cadillac Escalade is pretty much the same as any GM truck or SUV, so it's an easy thing to do. Now, as you can see, the front lift is in place. It's all put back together. What's sitting there on the table is what goes on the rear. Here's how it goes on. Unbolt the stock shock at the bottom, then remove the sway bar end links and the lower control arm. Now just lower the axle and remove the springs. All right, since the Skyjacker lift is designed to lower the axle to give us the lift that we need, we're gonna need longer control arms, longer sway bar end links, and of course, longer coil springs. Now, a couple of special brackets that come with the kit are the shock relocation brackets and the bump stop brackets. The new bump stop brackets just bolt to the axle. Follow that with the new lower control arms, and don't forget to grease them or they'll squeak on you. The shock brackets fit in the stock shock pocket to raise the mounting point of the shock. Now slide the new coil springs in and jack up the axle to hold them in place. Finally, put on the new sway bar end links and reconnect the shocks. And that's what's involved in lifting a Cadillac Escalade 3.5 inches. But we're not completely done yet. We still need to put wheels and tires on this thing, and those are right over there. Now, since Cadillac is such an iconic name, we figured we needed to take the same approach with the rolling stock. So we went to Dick's CPEC and got both wheels and tires. Now, the tires we're using, they call the Mud Country. As you can see, this is a mud tire. You got big, aggressive lugs in here. They're gonna give great traction. They're gonna self-clean well, and they're situated in such a way to where this is actually gonna be a decent tire on the highway. For wheels, we're using what CPEC calls the Torque. Now, this is an 8-spoke aluminum wheel that's specifically designed for more modern trucks and SUVs that require more offset, more room for bigger brakes, and the ability to run modern tire pressure sensors. Now, the size that we're using on tires, 33 inches tall, 10 inches wide. On the rim, 20 by 9. As you can see, that flat black finish is gonna look really good on that black Cadillac. Now, you've got to admit, this is no longer your typical Cadillac. Now, like I said before, since this thing is gonna spend most of its time on the highway, we figured we'd do at least one thing to help the fuel economy and the performance before we give it back to Jason. So, we're gonna put on an air raid air intake system. First, just pull off the stock air filter and intake system. Then bolt the new intake box and inlet tubes in place. Finish it up with the new filter, and you'll be ready to roll. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering, didn't you just mess up the ride of this Cadillac by putting a 3.5-inch lift on it? No, man, that's the magic of this Skyjacker system. Remember, we reused all the stock air shocks, the leveling system, most of the springs. This thing's gonna ride just like it did before, like a Cadillac. The only real difference is it's 3.5 inches higher. And for a hardcore off-road guy like Jason Sturgeon, that's gonna make all the difference in the world. If I was to ask you what the most popular form of motorsports was among kids, I bet you'd say drag racing. Nope. NASCAR. Nope. IndyCar, drifting, Baja racing. Nope, nope, nope. It's monster trucks. Because nothing attracts a kid like a big, loud truck on huge tires that's virtually unstoppable. And wouldn't it be cool to make a living driving something like that? Well, some people do. Check it out. In the early 80s, Alan Pezo was a hot rod kid who found his calling when he saw Bob Chandler and Bigfoot crushing cars. Knowing he was destined to pilot one of these big monsters, he selected the name Predator and began building and racing monster trucks. This started a 30-plus year journey that would eventually land Alan in the Monster Truck Hall of Fame. But as great as those achievements are, the most inspiring thing is the fact that Alan has been able to do what he loves for so long and still be competitive. How is that possible? Well, the best way to answer that is to show you what it takes to be a predator.
We were right there, you know, among the pioneers of changing the body image. And today, you see a lot of the trucks out now have different designs and stuff. You know, and I feel pretty fortunate that I was one of the first ones to do that, and everybody else followed after me.
The Predator operation is small as far as staff goes, with Alan and Lenny shouldering the burden of driving the trucks and keeping them in operation. And they know every inch of these rigs because they hand build them all. Chassis, suspension, motor, drivetrain, everything is fabricated and assembled utilizing their years of experience in the competitive monster truck world.
You always strive to set yourself apart from somebody else, and that's why I did what I did many years ago with a different face on it and the different paint jobs and things like that, because I didn't want to fit in. I didn't want to be known as the, you know, the Chevrolet guy or, you know, this guy or that guy. I wanted to be my own identity.
But building the trucks is only part of the job. The other part is driving them, and that's something they do virtually every weekend all across the nation.
Can you give me 5, buddy?
5.
Hey, give me 5. All right.
And because they understand the importance of those young fans, the guys also built a Predator ride truck that allows people to experience the thrill of riding in a real monster truck. And you'll find passengers from every age, gender, and ethnic background clamoring for a seat. Because like we said before, these things appeal to the kid in everybody. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking how cool it would be to get some of Alan's parts and expertise and apply them to your project. Well, you can do that because he also has a fabrication shop where he develops products and works on other projects. So, since I've been planning on doing a custom radius arm suspension on Sergeant Rock, I figured it would be perfect to hook up with Alan so we could rub a little bit of monster truck DNA on this thing. The first step was to cut off all the old leaf spring suspension and then fabricate radius arms to take their place. Now the arms are built with 2¼ inch tubing with a massive 1/4 inch wall, and the rod ends are huge 3-inch joints from ballistic fabrication. These are going to be incredibly strong. And by making them as long as possible, we'll get very little caster change as the axle cycles through its range of motion. The axle brackets also came from ballistic fabrication and really sped up the process. Of course, the center link mounts had to be hand fabricated as well as custom cross members to support everything. A mid-engine mount was also added to help keep that 850 horsepower firmly planted between the frame rails. The Rockwell axles are stuffed with heavy-duty axle shafts and U-joints from Overson Engineering, so we won't be snapping axles when we stomp on this thing. Traction comes from ARB air lockers front and rear. The truck is going to sit on Predator Racing nitrogen gas shocks, a smaller version of the ones on the monster truck.
We make them in various lengths. This particular shock here is a 14-inch travel.
Okay.
We make them 20-inch travel, 26-inch, and 30-inch.
These will offer incredible performance and tunability and bolt right in place of the coilovers we have on there now. Panhard bars front and rear keep the axles from moving side to side, and to keep the body level, massive monster truck style sway bars were fit front and rear. Now at first glance, you may not notice too much of a difference in the look and the stance of this truck. It's because there isn't any. It's pretty much sitting where it was before. But the system I have now is much stronger, much more flexible than those old leaf springs. And as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of ground clearance under here and an old school look that you're just not going to get out of a modern four-link. Now obviously, I still have a lot of fabrication and engineering and assembly to do to this thing to finish it up, but that's okay, because everything you do to your vehicle takes you one step closer to being done.
And now, Parts Bin.
There's no doubt that one of the most important things in your interior are the gauges. Not only do they monitor your engine's vital signs, but they look cool. And the aftermarket is full of all kinds of cool gauges. But what if you don't like any of them? What if you want to keep your stock gauge panel and just mount modern gauges in the original position? Well, Intellitronics has got an answer for you in what they call their Created Dash system. And check this out. You have 6 gauges: oil, volts, temperature, fuel, tachometer, and speedometer, all the sending units. Then you've got a piece of plexiglass that covers the gauges and a plastic piece to mount the gauges on. Then you basically cut the plastic and arrange and mount the gauges in whatever factory or custom layout that you want. And when it's all back together, you're going to have a dash that not only looks good, but also features stuff like high-speed recall, 0 to 60 in quarter-mile times, all that cool stuff that comes with a modern digital gauge. If you want a unique dash, you might need to create your own, and Intellitronics can help make that possible. If gauges are one of the most important things in your interior, then definitely the most worn out is the carpet, because you stomp on it and spill things on it almost every day, and the average life of a carpet is 5 to 7 years. So then what? You sell the vehicle? No, man, you replace the carpet. And LMC Auto Carpet's got everything that you're going to need to do just that. Whether you're driving a car, a truck, a van, an SUV, from 1940 to present, they've got it. Now check this out. They use the same material that came originally in your vehicle. The carpet is molded to fit your floor pans perfectly. The toe pads and the padding underneath are all in place just like the originals. If you're tired of sinking your feet into a nappy old carpet, replace it with a new one from LMC Auto Carpet. You know, there's an old saying that people have been arguing about for years. Size matters. And I guess if you're talking about a big off-road truck like this, that might be true, but then again, maybe not. Because RC four-wheel drive specializes in radio control, scale rock crawlers and monster trucks that are so realistic, you might try to get in there and drive it, if you were smaller. They've got things like working suspensions, U-joints, beadlock wheels, 2-speed transfer cases, IROC tires, winches. If you can find it for a real truck, chances are you can find a small version at RC four-wheel drive. But they just don't make and sell parts. You can also get complete, ready-to-run trucks that wheel just like their full-size brothers without the cost of the broken parts. And if you want something that's really unique, RC four-wheel drive can even build a scaled-down version of your actual truck. So if you're ready to experience the world of radio control off-roading in incredible detail at a price you can afford, you need to go to RC four-wheel drive, get a truck, and get going. Because even in the radio control world, size does matter.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Air Raid, American-made quality and performance since 1992.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Jackie White from Kentucky. And Jackie's got a long history with cars. He's been a drag racer for years. He's built national show winners. But all this time, he's been looking for one specific car because he knew if he could find it, he could turn it into the coolest street rod ever. Yeah, you wives and girlfriends have never heard that before, right? Well, Jackie's car is a Lincoln Zephyr 3-window coupe, and he found one. So the first thing he did was tear it apart, turn it into a street rod. Check this out. Now, a 39 Lincoln already has good lines, but Jackie knew that he could make them better. So he modified the doors and suicided them, grafted in Mini Cooper headlights, stretched and peaked the rear fenders, and fabricated a new floor. A modern air suspension and a 9-inch rear are what this thing sits on. Now, one thing I want you to notice, go back to that other picture. Look at the shop that he's working in. I mean, it's just a regular 2-car garage, and that is great. Now, I know you're wondering about the engine. Well, it's got a Hemi in it. Take a look at this. This car is gonna run. Now, Jackie says it's 75% complete. He's hoping to have it on the show car circuit soon, so you'll probably see this car. And Jackie, to recognize what could be the coolest street rod that any of us have ever seen, we hooked up with our buddies at Air Raid. We're gonna give you an air intake system for whatever you want. All you gotta do is go to their website, pick out the part number, and they'll send it to you. Also, to help you keep track of your project, we're gonna send you one of our build books so you can write down the particulars of that car. Also, since you're an old drag racer, we're gonna give you a year's subscription to Drag Illustrated so you can keep up with what's going on there. Now, the rest of you guys, if you want to have your vehicle featured on the show, you got to send it in to What Are You Working On? We'll do our best to get it on the air. All right, got a lot to work on here. That means you've got stuff to work on, so get out there, work on something.